This is the last part 6 of 6 of this video series on showing how to answer the problems on this ACT practice test that I got from the ACT College Board website. This video will have problems 51 through 60. In problem 51, it's a ratio. X to y is 5 to 2, y to z is 3 to 2. What's the ratio of x to z? Well, I like to write ratios as fractions. So x over y is 5 to 2. Y over z is 3 to 2. So if you take x over y times y over z, the y's cancel and you get x over z. So I'm going to take 5 halves and multiply it by 3 halves and get 15 fourths, or 15 to 4, which is e. So a ratio, I always think of them as fractions, and if you think of them as fractions, it's a pretty easy thing to go through and multiply and come up with this ratio. Problem 52. Which of the following is a solution statement for an inequality shown below? Okay, so when you have a variable in the middle on a double inequality like this, you just solve the whole thing all the way down. And as it's written right here, the first thing we're going to do is subtract 1. And because you have two inequalities, you need to subtract 1 from each section. So you have section 1, section 2, and section 3. And when you subtract minus 5 minus 1 is minus 6 is less than negative 3x is less than 9. Now we're going to divide everything by negative 3. Negative 6 divided by negative 3 is 2. Negative 3x divided by negative 3 is x. 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3. And because whenever you multiply or divide by a negative sign, you flip the inequality. If you look at this, I'm going to rewrite it. Negative 3 is less than x is less than 2 is the answer we're looking for, and that is h. The reason I rewrote it like this is you go smallest to largest, with x in the middle is just standard convention. But because it's multiple choice, you need to format it in whatever way you need to format it to get the answer. So you need to know how to manipulate the format of an equation or an expression to match the answer. Problem 53. Formula for the surface area of a rectangular solid. The area is 2 times the length and width. So length and width is the area of this side. You multiply it by 2 because you have a top and a bottom. 2 times length times height, which is this side and this side over here. And then 2 width times height, which is the front and the back. So that gives you the surface area of this cube. Now what happens if you double all of the dimensions? And I'm just going to look at what happens to one side, because whatever happens to one side is going to be what happens to each of the sides, so it'll be the same. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to divide this. So if this is h and this is h, that means the whole side is 2h. If this is L and this is L because you double it, the whole side is 2L. So 2L times 2H is going to be 4LH. That's an H. And over here, it would just be LH. So the area of each side is 4 times greater. And I drew it like this so you have a cube. This is the original. If you go twice the height and twice the length, it's 4 times bigger. So the answer to 53 is B, 4 times bigger. Not intuitively obvious, you need to draw that out to make sure you understand what you're doing. Problem 54. If a dog can eat 7 cans of food in 3 days, at that rate, how many cans of food does the dog eat in 3 plus D days? So if you can eat 7 cans of food in 3 days, 7 cans of food in 3 days, that is the slope or the ratio. So how much food can you eat in D plus 3 days? So after 3 days, you've had 7 cans. So after the 3 days, you've had 7 cans. So if you're 1 day, after that, it's 7 plus 7/3. If you're 2 days, it's 7 plus 7/3 times 2. So the equation, 7/3 times D, is how many cans of dog food the dog eats for each day after 3 days. And 7 is how many he's eaten at the 3rd day point. So it's 7 plus 7/3 D is that. And answer, K is the answer. And you could write this as 7 plus 7/3 D or 7D over 3. Many ways to write it, but 7 is the total number of cans that the dog has eaten after 3 days, and 7/3 is how many cans the dog eats per day. Coming down to the home stretch. Problem 55. Kelly asked 120 students about skiing. The results of the poll are shown in the table below. Have you skied either cross-country or downhill? 65 said yes. If you answered yes to question 1, did you ski downhill? 28 skied downhill, and 45 skied cross-country. So the question is, after completing the poll, Kelly wondered how many of the students polled had skied both cross-country and downhill. So how many of the students polled indicated that they had skied both cross-country and downhill? Well, we don't have that, but what we have is if 28 students skied downhill and 45 students skied cross-country, 28 plus 45, let's not try and think too hard. Let's pull up a calculator. 28 plus 45 is 73. So it looks like 73 people did a combination of downhill and cross-country, but only 65 answered yes to the question. So 73 minus 65, which is 8, 73 minus 65 is 8. So there are 8 people that answered yes to both of these questions. And another way to look at it would be if you had a Venn diagram like this. This circle would be you answered yes to question 2. This is you answered yes to question 1. There's an overlap of 8, which means 20 people skied downhill only. 8 people skied downhill and cross country. And then 45 minus 8, I'm going to be lazy, 45 minus 8, 37. So inside this circle, there are 28 downhill skiers. Inside this circle, there are 45, and that should be 3, sorry. There are 45 cross-country skiers. There are 8 kids that got counted twice. And if you got counted twice, you need to subtract that out. So the answer here is 8, and this is set theory in Venn diagrams, and we can talk more about the different ways that a question like this can be asked and the types of information you can derive from the question. Question 56. The square below is divided into 3 rows of equal areas. So Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, they're all equal. Top row, A and B are the same size. Second row, A, B, and C are the same size. Third row, A, B, C, D are the same size. So the question is, what fraction of the entire square area is in a region labeled A? So because there are 3 different sections, it's going to be 1/3, and then A takes up 1/2 of that 1/3. The second, it's 1/3. A makes up 1/3 of this section, and the bottom row, which is also 1/3, A makes up 1/4 of that section. So 1/3 times 1/2 is 1/6. 1/3 times 1/3 is 1/9. 1/3 times 1/4 is 1/12. Now we need to get a common denominator, and the common denominator is going to be 36. And how did I find 36 as the common denominator? Let me just go off to the side and show you how I do this. So 6 factors down to be 2 and 3. 9 factors down to be 3 and 3. 12 factors down 2 times 6, 2 times 3. So you have to have two 2's, 2 times 2. You have to have 2 3's, 3 times 3. 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 9 is 36. So I use prime factorization to find the least common denominator. And also, if you look over here at all of the possible answers, you know that 9 and 12 probably aren't going to be right, so 36. So what do you need to multiply 6 by to get 36? That would be 6, right? So that would be 6 over 36. 9 to get 36, that would be 4. That's 4, 36. 12, you need to multiply that by 3. So that's 3 over 36. 6 plus 4 plus 3 is 13 36. And that is K. 57 is a trigonometry question. You might get to it at the end of geometry, but it's probably trigonometry. So you have a sine wave, and the first equation, y is equal to sine x, is this line. How do I know it's that line? So let's put sine x into the calculator. And I don't expect you to be able to do this. This is a graphing calculator, and it requires an understanding of trig functions to be able to do this. But let's graph this sine function. And you know what? Just to make it look the same as the calculator, I'm going to do this in a blue. Okay, so that is sine x. So that is, it's called a parent function. That's what sine x looks like. And what this part, adding the a does, is it shifts the function left and right. And adding a number b at the end, so if you have sine x plus some number b, if y is equal to that, if b is 1 or 2 or 5 or anything but 0, it's going to move the function. If it's positive, it's going to move it up. If it's negative, it's going to move it down. So the second function, this function, is not shifted up or down. It is shifted left and right, but it's not shifted up and down. So b has to be 0. So this is the only possible answer. And the reason that you know a is less than 0, you don't, because you could shift this way, shift it that far, or you could shift it this way. So the deal with the trig function, you know a is not 0, but you don't know whether it's positive or negative because you can slide this function left or right. I know it's confusing. We'll spend some time talking about trig functions in our review, but the key here is the plus b makes the function go up and down, and the only answer that it can be is A. Problem number 58. Which of the following number line graphs shows the solution set for the inequality the absolute value of x minus 5 is less than -1? The absolute value, all the absolute value is it tells you the distance you are from the origin. Absolute value is always positive. For this problem, you need to remember absolute value is always positive. If the absolute value is always positive, there's no value of x that will make the absolute value less than -1. So it's the empty set because the absolute value is always positive. We can work some absolute value problems in our review, and we will do that. But if you ever get absolute value of something has to be less than 0, it can't be. It can be 0, but it can't be less than 0. So in this case, the answer is K. Problem number 59. As part of a probability experiment, Elliot has to answer 4 multiple choice questions. For each question, there are 3 possible answers, only one of which is correct. If Elliot randomly and independently answers each question, what's the probability he will answer all 4 questions correctly? Well, the first question, the probability is 1/3. The second question, the probability is 1/3. Third question and fourth question. And in probability, if you have more than one event, you just multiply the probabilities together. So 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3. 1/3 times 1/3 is 1/9. 1/3 times 1/3 is 1/9. 1/9 times 1/9 is 1/81, which is E. Another way that you could do that, putting into your calculator, in parentheses, put 1 divided by 3, and then raise that to the 4th power, because it's 1/3. This is equal to 1/3 to the 4th power. And it gives you a fraction. And I realize I'm doing some things with my calculator that yours doesn't do. I'm working to get an emulator for the calculator that you purchased, so 1/81. Our last problem, problem number 60. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about this because, again, this is definitely a trigonometry question. You have a cute little triangle, and all a cute triangle means is all of the angles are less than 90 degrees. So you have 14, 18, and 20. 14, 18, and 20. Those are all centimeters. And you need to solve for the smallest angle, which is opposite the smallest side. So this is called the law of sines. This is called the law of cosines. And the law of sines is a ratio thing. The law of cosines is if you have 3 sides and need to find an angle, or if you have 2 sides and an angle and you need to find the 3rd side, the law of cosines is what you would use. And cosine of C, angle C, side C, angle C, side C. So it's 14 squared is equal to 18 squared plus 20 squared minus 2 times 1820 cosine theta. The answer to this is J. We will talk a little bit about trigonometry to help you prepare for the ACT, but obviously we're not going to do a semester's worth of trigonometry prior to the exam. So this is one of those questions that would set apart the people who are on the advanced track taking college level classes in high school and those that are not going into engineering and that sort of stuff. So I would not expect you to get this problem. We'll talk a little bit about it. And when we sit down and talk, we'll have a conversation about how to guess and see which one might work best or which ones don't work at all. That concludes the 6-part series on answering the math portion of the ACT practice exam.